G'day everyone, and welcome to the Insight NBA show. It's a tale of two Maddies. How are you, Malley?
Very good, mate. How about yourself?
I'm stuck on camp still. I'm still here. I know we did a mock draft the other night, but I'm still in camp limbo. But I'm here to talk about Yahoo, your favorite drafting platform, your favorite fantasy basketball platform.
Love it.
I know it's not. I know you love a good gag to start a show. Let's get down to it. We have found 10 targets between us that we think you should have a look at. The ranks are changing. Where can you squeeze some value out of Yahoo for your fantasy draft? Let's get down to it.
They're playing basketball.
It's time to strap in and get ready. The Insight NBA team is in the arena, bringing you the ultimate play-by-play on who's hot and who's not to help you win your leagues and dominate your mates. You're now hooping with your hosts, Matty G, Skitty, and Malley for the Insight NBA show.
Malley, I think we should start the conversation with the interesting exercise of defining what value is. So when we say what a target is or someone that's outside of that, what do you define value as?
Yes, getting somebody who's slipping down the board where you think that wherever the position you take them is going to get you value. So, which is very difficult for people to do, myself included. You see a name, you think, will they last till they come round to me? And you often just take them because you've got in your mind, this is the guy who I wanted. And even though I think that, he may not be there at 40 and I'm at my 38th pick, my 28th pick, I'm just going to get them now because I'm in panic stations. But finding value, I guess, comes in, looking for people who others have fear about maybe, or maybe misconceptions about, and snabbling them up while you can. Even though they may not play into your particular build, sometimes they're just too good to let slide, and you can worry about, figuring out their fit later on.
Well, the first one like this, and this show is dedicated to little targets who we think are maybe the rankings on Yahoo, and we're going to do an ESPN show as well. Yes, your preferred, Malley, because I know you're such a ESPN boy. But for those of you on Yahoo, we've found some guys who we not only think could exceed their ADP, but because of when you're drafting as well in their rankings, there are times that people are following this and their X ranks going off. Not everyone is, typing in names to add to their queue. People are freaking out because their queue is getting decimated. So there's this draft panic as well that creates a vacuum. And if you don't know where these guys are on the board, if they're far down, that's great. That's good. People aren't going to generally scroll down unless they're like just a really experienced fantasy punter, especially if you're new. It's really important that you have these guys on deck ready to go, Malley.
100%. And it probably also is a good time to remind people that if you are a league manager or you have contact with your league manager, making sure you get that 60 seconds. Like, I don't know, you don't want to rush your picks. You want everyone to have plenty of time to make an informed choice. But you're right, even 60 seconds isn't long enough.
A live draft as well. Like you and I have been in some live drafts and you're swearing under your breath every chance you get.
100%. So give people the time. Yeah, I know you want people to move and you want people to make snap decisions, but sometimes moving too fast is putting people off, and then they're not interested in playing in your league, and I don't know, everything falls in a heap, and it's just no fun for anyone.
100%. Now, look, let's get to the first guy. This one is about the ADP. He's gone from 37 to 38, and we like him. He was the head banner of our show. It is Fred VanVleet, Malley, who finished at the Houston Rockets last year as the 29th ranked player overall, even after a slow start. So one round behind for a guy, Fred VanVleet, who historically has gone at the end of the second, turn of the third, which is about pick 25, 26. That's about a round of value. And his ADP on Yahoo and on current trends is actually reflecting a little bit more of a slide as well. He's actually just bumped back down. He's gone from 36 initially to 37. So he's about the value there. You think that he's like a top 30 player. So this is where you can get a small margin, but the margin's bigger because it's a higher quality or caliber of player?
And I mean, I've seen some sites rank him as high as 25. So, I mean, from site to site, even there, you can see what's that 4 or 5 different positional rankings in what other websites will call their end of season kind of a marker. I mean, I started to think about what are the reasons that he's slipping, and the three that I kind of came up with is that people might fear the trade deadline and worry
Yep.
about Houston really starting to roll with their youth core. And he
Mhm.
is an older player on that team. I'd say they'd probably want to move Dylan Brooks first, but I'd say the money really lies in the contract that Fred's on at the moment. So
Yeah.
I think people
He got
might
a payday.
worry that, yeah, they might worry that he's going to go from this big role and the role might, minimize, or he might not fit well on the team that he goes to, especially if it's a contender. The other thing is that I just don't think people understand his fantasy value. They might get scared off by the fact that this guy isn't a great field goal percentage guy. It is a weakness of his. He's not a big scorer, especially in this Houston Rockets system. He's the facilitator. He's a true point guard,
Yeah.
but he's a good defensive guy for someone who's like 5'0". He
He is, isn't he?
is a great assist guy. His turnovers aren't amazing, but they're certainly worse in that top 50 area for what he does. And maybe this is my third kind of thought on why he's slipping as much as he is, potentially because people are starting to think Reed might hold that position.
Mhm.
I don't think so. I think he's a rookie guard. I think if they didn't run Amen last year, who was a better,
Yep.
higher draft pick, they're probably not going
100%.
to jump and go Reed's the guy who we're putting out there now. So I think there's panic around him. But I also remember him dropping, falling down the rankings last year. So people must have this stigma in their heads because he's kind of proved himself last year, and he's actually worse off than he was last year. So yeah,
Look, I
figure
think
that
I
out.
think that well, this is where we talk about. This is where there is value to come in with this. So when we talk about it, we talk about, okay, Fred VanVleet, you've seen him as high as 25, maybe on some sites around 30. The maximization of this is basically around advantage. Like it might be his ceiling, but also he's got a pretty decent floor as well. So we're talking about guys who are people are just a little bit off, but the floor is really, really good. The floor for this bloke is a top 25 asset in the NBA. The ceiling for him is top 15.
Mm.
And I'm talking none other than one of your. Look, I know that you love your music. I think there's, Andre 3000 is the guy that I'm talking of. Jimmy Butler.
He's a good guy. Yeah, look at him.
He's.
What's he going to pull out this year in photo day?
I can't wait to see the memes of Jimmy Butler at Photo Day in Miami. Currently, it depends on where you look. I know that Basketball Monster had him ranked, I think, in the top 30. Jimmy Butler over on hashtag basketball has him as 29, so just inside that top 30. This is a guy who currently on Yahoo, people are not touching him. We were in a draft the other night, and he was still, what was it, Malley, 50 something? He was hanging about.
Yeah.
His current ADP is 48.6. He is ranked 46 right now. How many games does he play is the question, isn't it?
I mean, that's the question every year. This isn't a new question. This is the question people ask themselves year in, year out with Jimmy because he seems to get injuries all over the place. It's not even like a reoccurring injuries. He also seems to sit games when it's not injury concerns. Like I feel like he's a guy who, if he needs a night off, he'll take a night off, and good on him. He's a human. But last year, the steals came back down to like a very humanly 1.3. So I think that is probably was really keeping his fantasy value afloat. But obviously, the biggest reason he's not a young man. Miami seemed kind of stagnant. They didn't make a lot of moves in this off season. I mean, they didn't really make a lot of moves last season either. And I think people always, and we know this better than some, like the shiny new thing, and that's not what Jimmy Butler is anymore. No matter what kind of hairstyle and makeup he puts on for photo day, It's still the same old Jimmy underneath it all. And when it's depending on how deep your league is, you could be picking him up as your second or third guy. And that just seems a little dangerous for me.
Well, especially when we've known for many, many years that he's out there, he returns value. And when he plays, he's great. And as I said, he's a top 25 player. But there's another guy who's drifted off last year who was much high. People were thinking it was value. And like you said, change of teams. Last year, the new shiny thing was the Phoenix Suns. And Bradley Beal was part of that new Phoenix Suns. Not an overtly successful year for him last year in Phoenix. Oft injured was our boy Bradley Beal. But you see a possible return to form here for him, and possibly top 60 value for Beal in the season. We're both kind of high on him. Not high, but we like him.
Yeah, it's funny, I just talked about the Jimmy situation and not a lot changing, and that kind of maybe being a downfall for the guy. And you kind of think potentially it might be the opposite scenario for Beal, where really the team hasn't undergone a lot of changes. Obviously, Tyus Jones is coming in. And I'd say that's probably, again, where the panic looms. It's not how does he fit in this team, it's how does he fit around Tyus. Maybe people considering someone's got to go. Maybe they think that that he will maybe play the six-man role, and Tyus will, be in that starting group and take away touches and, well, probably not shots because that's not really Tyus's game. But yeah, I'd say that's probably what's getting under people's skin at the moment and giving people the heebies and making them think that Bradley Beal might not be a target. And as you said, he started the season really poorly with his injuries, and then he came back and then he was injured again, and people held on to him for so long. And in the end, he produced, but I think a lot of people had moved on by then. Like if you got those last few great weeks out of him, it was probably someone who picked him up when you had to drop him, and you've just given the value to somebody else.
And even looking around projections between the sides, hashtag basketball has him as a projected pick this year at 55 to finish the season. Over on Josh Floyd at Basketball Monster has him at 52. We've got him in the 50s at our big draft board as well. And our big draft boards, the second pass of it is coming this week. If you haven't yet got it, they are moving on our Patreon. Make sure you get down and get it. It's got Malley, your draft board, my draft board, Matrix's draft board, Skitty's draft board. If it's not on there with 220 player reference, this is going back to how many games they played per year for the last 5 years. It's got our consensus board, so where these guys go. We've got him all around there, yet this is where we find out that it's value. Because on Yahoo, he is 77th ranked currently, and he is the 86th player in ADP currently. So this is someone who is like 2.5 rounds of value who could just be sitting there for you. You don't even have to jump for him, Malley. He's sitting there.
I just look at the other guys around him. Like I'm looking at my draft board now. You've got the likes of Poole, if you want to go that early. You've got Zach LaVine, you've got Giddy, you've got Hero, you've got Miller. You've got these kind of names around him, and they all come with their like inherent risks as well. So it's not like there's a lot of brilliant choices in that 50, 60, 70, 80 type range for someone in the shooting guard small forward position. It's either youth is against them. The team could be moving on. Young guys coming up and taking places. Other injuries, like, obviously Tyler Hero in that list. So maybe sometimes it's better the devil you know what Beal can produce. Yeah. And, maybe you roll with him. I know I will.
Look, absolutely, I will be as well if I can grab him in drafts at the right price. And I'll also talk about injuries. This guy, we forget about players who were injured last year. We also forget about them when their team has got a shiny new thing like Mikal Bridges in the New York Knicks. And they've got Julius Randle returning. So we wonder about this guy who was brought into the team last season from New York. They've re-signed him as well. Like it wasn't like, oh, we'll just get him on a rental and piss him off. They've made an investment in OG Anunoby. This is one of the most egregious rankings. But not only that, punters right now just seem completely off him and more on Mikal Bridges. In fact, I'm seeing Mikal Bridges go earlier and earlier in drafts, and this guy is going later and later. In fact, the tune of OG Anunoby you can sing at rank 109 on Yahoo right now, and ADP at 103. Malley, that's just for a top 75 bloke, easy, or not easy, but potentially flirting 50 50s, 60s, 70s, that's a massive pull your way.
Yeah, and I think there's guys on the Knicks who'll find themselves being played out of the game more quickly than OG, leaving the fantasy skate for a while and going back into real NBA, team fit. He's the kind of guy who does the dirty work. He'll take shots when they come to him. He gets steals, he can get blocks, he can guard in multiple positions. So I think that's going to earn him court time. And we know how important actually getting minutes are for your fantasy pickups. It doesn't matter how good you are. If you're sub 25 minutes, it's no good. And he's going to get more than that for sure.
And a guy who's right around the zone, like when we talk about names like you did with old mate Bradley Beal around that zone, another guy who you could almost consider a steal specialist. Steals can be very hard to get. OG can bring those. We know that he's going to have to play defense. It's Tibbs. That's what he's out there for. One of our favorite little swipers in the NBA is Alex Caruso, who joins via trade with the Chicago Bulls. Giddy's over there now. He's soaring up boards. But Alex Caruso he's the 100th ranked player currently. Malley, that just seems like, okay, he doesn't bring us a lot of points. His percentages are okay, but he gives us steals. He doesn't turn the ball over that much. He gets us rebounds. He gets us all these things that we should value in fantasy, especially in categories, not so much points leagues, but 100 for a guy that's, again, exceeding his ADP by 2 or 3 rounds at that cost. That's a great floor.
And I mean, you would never take him and OG in this for the same team build because they're kind of doing similar things, getting you, as you said, a few threes. They might be a decent steals guy. They don't turn the ball over too much. Maybe, again, people fear the unknown. They don't know what the fit's like. If he would have stayed with Chicago, I think he probably would have been, closer up or lower down the board and maybe being picked up by people earlier. They don't know whether he's going to start or whether he's going to come off the bench, depending how the Isaiah Hartenstein fit goes in that 5. But you're right. He's a safety net when it comes to giving us those steals. He'll give you a few assists. He's got shooters around him on that team. Obviously, people who are happy to score. He might play some point guard from time to time, obviously with Giddy gone, and that was something that Giddy was doing a lot of when he was over with OKC. So yeah, I think there's definitely value anywhere if you can get him around the 100 mark. You're cheering.
We were going to talk about this bloke a little bit later on, but I think we should talk about him now because we spoke about specialists. So we had those steal specialists in OG, Anunoby, and Alex Caruso. One of the things that we know that's really easy to get off the waiver wire are 3-point specialists. The question is Klay Thompson at the 3-point specialist phase of his career there in Dallas? We know he's not playing the defense that he used to. He's not that old elite Klay Malley, but it is a new fresh home for him. It's a fresh start. He seems engaged and really happy to be there. This is the value of Klay Thompson. He's going to get minutes. Apparently he will be this starter. Now, I've seen him be ranked around 105, 110, and I've seen him over, for instance, #basketball has him at 126. So there's this big round jump. Now, this is where we talk about the value and where you might be able to get it. The Yahoo rank for him currently is 143, which means he is in a 12-team, 12 roster situation. He is like the second last dude going, statistically speaking.
Yeah.
Where do we see value for them? And he's being drafted, though, ADP at 106. So are we overdrafting Klay and avoiding, or should we just find the balance of him about 130?
I feel like you're right. The truth probably lies somewhere in between in that 120 to 130 mark. He's a bona fide shooter. He's playing on a team with 2 of the best point guards in the league playing with him on the court at the same time in Kyrie and Doncic. He's going to get his shots. I think they'll, find ways to get him open so he can do what he's going to do. Hopefully he doesn't get cooked too much on the defensive end and they have to get rid of him. But they've also got 2 excellent defensive centers behind him to clean up the scraps as well. So I think he's going to fit in quite nicely there. And I think you're right. I wouldn't take him as high that 105, 106 mark, but 143 seems a bit wild, especially if you start thinking about some of the names that you'd have to put in front of him for him to drop that low. And I guess that's what this comes down to.
The conversation needs to be had about Dallas Mavericks because I love them as a value team this year. I love Klay Thompson, and he didn't make my list because I think I've said Dan Gafford's name just like so fucking much at this point. But there's another name that I absolutely love who's going in some leagues undrafted. We did this the other night. I know Hashtag Basketball has him at 132, and Yahoo has him way out here. We're talking about PJ Washington. Why is PJ such a great fit in Dallas, man?
We saw what he could do last year, and I guess, again, the reason he's dropping down is because people don't understand maybe what his value is. They maybe have fears about how Klay will impact him. Will he become the fourth option instead of the third option, which he was last year on the offensive end? I think he does what he does, and if you want some safety at that point in the draft, rather than taking a rookie who's going to take a while to warm up and get you value, if you're someone like me who wants to start winning the game from week one, he's the kind of guy you take. He's a win now type guy. He gets you the stats, and I think often when these guys move over from Charlotte, you figure out how weak they are. But I feel like he's done all right, and maybe that's a testament to the Dallas Mavericks system that he's still been able to perform. We'll see what happens with him. What was his ranking? What do they want?
145. So this is a guy at the end of drafts that's sitting around there. And he finished the last 3 months of last season inside the 127. When he came across, he was a little bit trepidatious to start with, but then he really hit his stride in the last 2 months of the season. As you said, he's going to need to play more defense and help be an anchor of that team, especially if Klay Thompson is out there on the foot. And so he came in about 102nd in the last 2 months of last season, and then he improved more as the season. So he came in at 143, then he was 102 ranked. So he's about that 100 value, but it's especially where he's just sitting there in the last, it's like, is it better the devil you know? And I think PJ Washington, because we know that there's the Gafford and the Lively split, again, both of them, good value. You can get them late in drafts in 2 center leagues, especially Gafford, who's a power forward center eligible. I love that. But then PJ Washington makes the case that he came in and he finished the last month of the season. Yeah, it's the last month of 23-24 as the 89th best player. And Gafford's generally going in drafts, so he's not so much a steal. He's a good value pick, 100%. But a target he can pick up in the last round and get a top 100 return on, that's a really solid investment you can make come draft day.
100%. And think about how many open shots he's going to get when he's sharing the court with Doncic, Irving, and Klay. Like, there's not enough people on the. You're going to get guarded by like the towel boy or something because they're just going to have to throw the last possible option at you. And yeah, I think he must be absolutely licking his chops thinking about how many buckets he's going to get.
Talking about the towel boy doing work last year, I think this guy actually subbed in at one point.
Segue.
There we go. I think someone who a lot of towels were thrown at him. The Poole boy, Jordan Poole from the Washington Wizards, everyone's darling of the pre-draft season last year. Could he be the number 1 scorer in the NBA? No. Could he be decent in Washington? Could we see him break out? No. It was a bit of disappointment. But it was a really good stretch that he put towards the end of last season, Malley. In the last 2 months of last season, he started to put it together. Even you've been quoted as saying he actually passed the ball instead of just shooting it. He has Alex Sarr, who's going to want to take a lot of shots, but he finished in the last 2 months of last season as the 80th best player. There's value for him in drafts all around the place.
Yeah, 100%. And, he goes in that weird grouping of guys that sit in that 70 to 100 zone who are guard eligible. He obviously comes with his own little bag of mysteries about, is he going to give a shit about playing this year? Because it didn't look like he was last year. He 100%. Went from a team where he was getting punched in the face and you thought, well, look how good he was there. And then he goes to a team where he's probably championed and maybe the pressure got to him too much. But you're right. Like, if he can play a little bit more point guard and a little less shooting guard, maybe that'd be good. I think you're right. When he started to distribute the ball, I think he was taking some of the ugliest shots off the dribble last year. Like, oh yeah, like I don't think even if you were a very casual basketball fan and you're watching him, you'd notice that something isn't right. But if he can stay in his lane a little bit more and maybe care about trying to win, they might hold on to the idea of him being one of the future guys on this team. So I think a fantasy pickup for him, especially when he's going in some drafts in the triple figures. He's still around in that 100 mark. I think you're minimizing your risk so much taking him over the hundreds. You'd be silly not to. And then you'd be kicking yourself to know that one of your competitors took him at 100 and is getting a guy who's putting up, top 60 numbers. So
yeah,
that's what I always think about is if I don't take him, someone who I'm trying to beat will.
100%. And this is where he has been retaining some value. He started around the 98th best player. His ADP has gone up to 91. So, okay, we're not talking a target there, but okay. At the same time, we did expect him possibly a top 60, top 70 player last year. Now, maybe he doesn't get there, but there is a case to be made, and I call this my Valentine's Day special. Because from Valentine's Day last year, Jordan Poole actually finished the season as the 72nd best player. That's not too bloody bad. 72 for a guy that I could get at 105. That's just getting that value time and time again, Malley. And that's where the Valentine's Day special that I love is Jordan Poole, 100%. You like that Valentine's Day thing, don't you? You're like, oh, how did G pick up that?
I do, but only because I thought you were going to segue into telling me about Denzel Valentine statistics, and I was really on the edge of my seat for that.
Well, no, you can actually get those though from the NBL boys, because I don't know if he's coming back this season to the Mighty Kings or not yet, but I'll find out from. So. I think he's over in Israel or somewhere right now, or doing another Netflix special. But no, it was more that I use that as a date because after Valentine's Day, I find that there's this nice little break. Everyone comes back from the All-Star break, and I kind of give it like a sabbatical. Like, okay, we were rested, but we might fuck about for the first week. And then about a week or so after the All-Star break, I find players aren't going to care for the rest of the season, or they're really making their move from the rest of the season. So I kind of use a Valentine's Day reference point in my head all the time. And it's also it's a bit longer than the last 2 months of the season. So it gives them more of a variety, but that's me. This guy, though, I thought he was misused last year. He was injured last year. We had the Herb Jones renaissance last year, and it wasn't Zion Williamson, and it wasn't CJ McCollum. It was Trey Murphy III. Trey Murphy III is an absolute stud. We forget how good he possibly was the year before that. But Trey Murphy is sliding in drafts the entire time. In fact, he finished the last part of last season from the Valentine's Day special. He finished as the 23rd best player in 9 category leagues. Now, yes, they bring in DeJounte Murray, but are we so egregiously insane that we're looking at draft boards and this guy has fallen into the 100s, Malley? Like, are we just missing something here?
I guess the big hope and the way that he gains his value is that he finds a way to get starters minutes, whether he's a starter or not. My hope is that they start to peel away from the idea that Brandon Ingram's any sort of part of their future, and they look to the youth and versatility of someone like Trey and someone like Herb. I think had only one of those guys been on the team, I mean, I remember the last 2 seasons, it was often it's going to be one of these guys who succeeds and kind of makes a name for themselves in New Orleans, but then they both have done that. They're both in their own rights are incredible players. And I think for the stat line that you're going to get from Trey, after we talked about Poole, someone who likes awful shots, Trey's a guy who takes clever shots. He hits threes. He gets defensive stats. With no center, he's probably going to get more rebounds because he's got the reach to be able to pull them down. It looked even in that image that you had before, like he's put on a little bit of size, which is probably good for him too, like filling out a little bit as he gets older.
An elite He's an elite 3-point shooter. And you said it bang on the head. This is a contract year almost for Brandon Ingram. I don't think they're going to throw the max at him. I wouldn't expect them to. They could do a cheeky sign and trade. They do, I think, need to shed about 1.7 or I think it's $1.7 million in cap space. They don't have a true center. Brandon Ingram, for me, is that trade bait that they're putting out there. And this is where you can look at the different rankings from different sites. Trey Murphy is 107 over on hashtag. He is much higher than that over on Basketball Monster as well. So there's a discrepancy even between analysts, which is where he's going to go, because you can see him ranked in here around 35 on Basketball Monster. So there is 70 spots of value as well. I have him much higher than the hundreds, but the basketball community doesn't. Yahoo doesn't even have it that. I mean, they have it at 90. I've got him in the 60s. But the ADP is even going after. So he's a guy that when we talk about value, he's sitting there in your ranks and people are just skipping over him like, nah, not Trey. Nah, not Trey. And he's actually dropped down and he's been consistently ADP'd at 98, which is instant value, especially when there's so much say. He could probably be 75, 65. And again, that's 3 rounds of value that you can eke out of these drafts. Someone who the margin is a bit smaller for, though, but there is some upside here. It's our last one of the 10 blokes. Gary Trent Jr. making his move down from Toronto. A really underwhelming season for him last year with the Raptors. Finds a new home in Milwaukee, Malley.
He kind of just got squeezed out, didn't he? And they moved on in a different direction. They didn't need old Gaz to do his good work over there. With Malik Beasley out and him in, you would assume that he's basically going to fall into the same role. He's a better defender. He's not as good a defender as maybe his stat lines would lead you to believe. I don't think he's going to be that steals guy that he was 2 seasons ago when he was like epic. But yeah, again, another guy that, you know, you got to look at a silver lining for everyone. His is his role, and he's going to have one there.
And
so
minutes.
Another guy.
I expect him 32 minutes a night. Easy.
Yeah, and that's with a healthy, what's his name?
Damian Lillard?
What's their small forward's name? I haven't made you do this for ages.
Chris Middleton. Yeah, Chris Middleton.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Chris Middleton, like, if he falls to pieces, which he's prone to do, that can only spell good things for Gary Trent as well.
And currently, this is another junior, not father. This is another, again, a night where there's a discrepancy. His rank on Yahoo was 131. His current ADP is 144.7, which means he's like probably like the last dude. When your draft ends, there's like Gary Trent Jr. is sitting there, like 144 dudes come off the board, and there's old mate Gaza just sitting there at 147 right now, amongst the likes of guys like Vince Williams Jr., DeAnthony Meltons, and other guys like this who just fall out. Russell Westbrook is at ADP of 142 right now on Yahoo. Guys like Andrew Wiggins not being touched, Mathurin, Isaiah Stewart, TJ McConnell, again, beloved streamer by all. But those were the 10 guys. Malley, take us through our 10 targets. I know that we start off with one of your faves.
Yeah, Fred. He's a guy that I'm going to pick up everywhere just because I like to win, and he's going to do that for me, especially at the positions places I'm going to pick him up. If I can get him in the 30s and 40s, you best believe, even if he makes no sense to my roster, I'm picking him up. Jimmy Butler, we know when he's healthy how great he can be. Bradley Beal, again, I think the poor health is behind him, and you're getting a steal if you can grab him anywhere in that 80s range. OG and Alex Caruso provide the same kind of stats and upside. Obviously, role will be interesting for both of them. Klay, we've talked about his strengths. We all know who Klay is. And if you want threes, he's going to get them. PJ sits in a similar kind of vein. We all feel like all the jokes have been made about Jordan Poole. So he's a guy that, whether it's a good
Prime
season,
out. Bounce back.
Nothing left.
Just even nothing can be. Nothing can be worse, Jordan. Nothing can be worse than last year. You're okay, mate. You're okay.
Yep, and then we've got Trey Murphy there in our little picture, looking handsome as heck. Role will be big for him, but if you pick him up, especially in one of these late picks, and he ends up getting these starters minutes, and they really turn to him, you're going to be laughing. And same with Gary Trent Jr. We know what he does. He's got a role, so safety at the end of your draft.
I like games played. I like minutes. I like points. I like threes. And especially if I'm punting field goal percentage, Gary Trent Jr. just rockets up your board like an exhaustive amount. He also doesn't mind getting to the line a little bit when he gets a bit clucky and plucky, and he can knock him down at about 850 as well. So it's a guy you love from the charity stripe. If you want the best for your draft season, again, make sure you check out our big draft board. The second pass of it is coming up this week. It's going to be huge. You can get that below. The link is at the Patreon. Make sure you like and subscribe to all things Insight Fantasy Sports. Daily content, pretty much dropping all the way up until you draft and get your mocks on, because draft season, it's like 7 weeks away, Malley. We're excited.
Yeah, I've got my little advent calendar out. Opening up the doors, eating a little chocolate every day we get closer to the to tip off on day one of the season.
Mate, we're absolutely pumped.
Christmas one, but who cares?
The chocolate's just a little bit rotten. No wonder you were sick the other day. Jesus. Mate, like and subscribe to everything. We'll catch you soon. ESPN on the way. More content from Insight.